Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
My name is Raymond Knox, and I'm a 42-year-old auto shop owner who's never been ashamed of my blue-collar hands. These hands rebuilt engines, tuned suspensions, and wiped grease from the dreams of first-time drivers and lifelong commuters. I took pride in that. Real pride. Until that Thanksgiving, when pride had to swallow the hard lump of humiliation. That day taught me something new. Shame doesn't always come from failure. Sometimes, it's handed to you like a paper plate, light, flimsy, and meant to carry weight it was never designed to hold. Clarissa, my wife, had always tried to keep a certain boundary between my world and hers. I ignored the little signs for years. The polite corrections when I said ain't in front of her father. The way she always suggested I wear the one blazer I owned every time we visited her family. I thought she was just trying to help me fit in. What I didn't see was she was trying to make me invisible. This year, her sister Jenna was hosting Thanksgiving at her sprawling, perfectly curated estate in Chestnut Hill. The kind of place where napkin rings had heirlooms and hors d'oeuvres needed pronunciation guides. I drove us there in my old Chevy Silverado, cleaned, polished, still too loud for Clarissa's taste. Our kids, Ari and Miles, were in the back seat, trying to guess how many pies would be served. I had joked, hopefully more than the number of insults I'll get this time. Clarissa didn't laugh. As we walked in, the warmth of the house was only surface level. Big smiles, quick air kisses, a chorus of "so glad you could make it, S." But underneath, the chill was clear. I wasn't one of them. I never was. Clarissa disappeared into the kitchen with her mother and sisters, their voices rising in harmonious judgment. I helped Ari and Miles hang their coats, told them to go say hello to their cousins, and headed toward the dining room. That's when Jenna intercepted me, her smile sharp as glass. "Oh, Ray," she said, with that sing-song voice that always felt like a pat on the head. "We've actually got a nice little setup for you, in the garage." I blinked. "The garage?" She laughed. "You know, more your vibe. We figured it'd be cozier. Less formal. The kids can join you too, of course." Then she added, just loud enough for the room to hear, "He's a mechanic. He's used to scraps." Laughter followed. Real laughter. Not the kind you fake for politeness. They meant it. They thought it was funny. And none of them, stepped in to stop it. I stood there, holding 2 pie tins and a bottle of ginger ale like some hired help who overstayed his welcome. I looked across the room. Clarissa had heard. I saw it in the way her hand paused at the wine bottle. But she didn't turn, didn't speak, didn't move. I clenched my jaw. I could have said something. I could have made a scene. But then Ari appeared beside me, her wide brown eyes searching mine, trying to understand. Miles followed close behind, dragging a folding chair behind him like it was punishment. "Is it really in the garage, Dad?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, bud, it is." He looked confused. "But why?" I crouched down, placing the food on the floor so I could touch his shoulder. "Because sometimes people don't know where to put you when they don't understand you. But it's all right. You and me, we make anywhere feel like home." That smile I forced nearly cracked my face in two. But I made it stick for them. For my kids. We followed Jenna to the garage. She opened the side door like she was doing me a favor. Inside, the smell of gasoline and paint thinner slapped us in the face. A folding table sat off to one side, covered in a mismatched plastic cloth. 2 rusty chairs and a milk crate were the only seats. No candles, no warmth, just silence and oil stains. They set down our plates, paper ones. The turkey was dry. The beans came from a can. No gravy. No sides. No one came to check on us. Ari sat without a word. Miles poked at his food, more interested in a stray bolt on the floor than the meal in front of him. And me? I sat there, holding a flimsy plate in one hand, trying to remind myself that I wasn't a child again, that I wasn't back in my father's shed, being told I'd never be good enough for a better life. But then I looked at my kids, saw the way they tried not to cry, how they glanced toward the house, hoping their mother would come, that someone would say this was just a mistake, that it wasn't deliberate, but it was. They meant it. Every silent decision, every misplaced laugh, every plate not placed at the main table. And something in me cracked. Not rage, not even sadness. Resolve. Because I'd been grateful for scraps long enough. The garage stank of old regrets, gasoline, rust, and the sharp bitterness of being forgotten. I sat on a creaky metal chair that wobbled every time I shifted my weight. The folding table wobbled too, its plastic cover smeared with some kind of floral print, trying too hard to be festive. There were no placemats, no candles, no music. Just 3 paper plates of lukewarm food and the echo of laughter leaking from the house that should have felt like home. Ari sat across from me, eyes blank, her fork untouched. She wasn't looking at me or the food. She just stared into some invisible place on the wall behind me. I knew that look. It was the same one I used to wear at her age, back when my own father's silences were louder than his fists. She wasn't angry. She was ashamed. And worse, she was trying not to let me see it. Trying to protect me. At 13, Miles was poking the beans on his plate, using his plastic fork like a sword. The food squished, but didn't move. He was humming something quietly, a little off-key tune I didn't recognize, probably just trying to keep from crying. He was 10. No kid should have to pretend like this was okay. I picked up my own fork and took a bite of turkey. Dry, flavorless. It felt like sawdust in my mouth. Even the cranberry sauce had a rubbery texture, like it came out of a can 2 Thanksgivings ago. I chewed slowly, then set the fork down. I wasn't hungry. Not for food, anyway. Ari, I said, keeping my voice calm, gentle. You all right? She blinked out of her trance and looked at me. Yeah. I tilted my head. That was too fast. She hesitated, then shrugged. I'm used to it. That cut deeper than anything Jenna had said earlier. Used to what, baby? She gave me a look I'll never forget. Them treating you like you're nothing. Like we're a joke. Miles stopped poking his beans. His hands folded in his lap. That was the moment it sank in. This wasn't just a bad Thanksgiving. This was their story now. A memory that would dig into them every time the holidays rolled around. And I hated it. I hated that I hadn't seen how far things had slipped until I saw it through their eyes. I'm not a joke, I said quietly, more to myself than anyone. But Ari nodded. Like she needed to believe that too. No, she said. You're not. But they treat you like you don't matter. I looked toward the tiny, dirty window that framed the back of the house. Inside, I could see Clarissa, laughing, a wine glass in her hand, face lit up in conversation. Her mother was right beside her. Jenna leaned against the counter, retelling the same story she always did about getting invited to the governor's fundraiser. The room was golden, glowing, warm, and none of it reached us. Clarissa hadn't come to check on us. Not once. I tried not to let the anger rise. Tried not to imagine standing in the middle of that perfect dining room and asking, loud and clear, why the hell they thought it was okay to exile me like I didn't belong. But what would have been the point? They didn't just exclude me. They erased me. Miles spoke up suddenly. Do we have to stay the whole time? I looked down at him. You want to leave? He nodded. It doesn't feel like Thanksgiving. It feels like a punishment. That hit me square in the chest. Because he was right. This wasn't family. This wasn't celebration. This was exile dressed up in good intentions and hors d'oeuvres. They hadn't said, get out, but they didn't have to. They made it clear in every decision, where we sat, what we ate, who was welcome where. I stood slowly, the chair groaning beneath me as it scraped the concrete floor. All right, let's go. Ari looked up, confused. Go where? Anywhere but here. They didn't ask again. Miles grabbed his coat. Ari picked up the pie we brought, still untouched. I grabbed the foil-covered dishes we brought from home. At least those were made with real love. As we stepped out into the driveway, the night air slapped my face like a dare. The house was still lit up, still loud, still buzzing with the kind of energy that always said, we're doing just fine without you. And for the first time, I believed them. They were fine without me. They had no intention of including me. Not as a man, not as a father, and certainly not as part of their family. But that was their problem now. I helped Miles into his seat in the truck and turned to Ari. You okay? She nodded slowly. Yeah, I'm glad we're leaving. Me too. I shut the truck door and took one last look at the house. The place where my marriage had slowly, quietly, painfully told me I wasn't enough. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. As I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. And for the first time in a long time, I saw something I liked. Conviction. We pulled away from the mansion with 3 untouched plates, a pie no one cared to taste, and a truth that would carry us further than I ever imagined. It wasn't about where we sat. It was about where we never would again. I was just about to scrape our untouched food into the trash when the driveway lit up like a movie set. Headlights, low, smooth, unfamiliar, crawled across the gravel, cutting through the thick silence outside the garage. My first thought was that someone had called a cab. Maybe one of Clarissa's cousins had too much wine and decided to cut the night short. But then I noticed the silhouette of the car. Long, sleek. Not the kind you call on impulse. It was a limousine. My first instinct was confusion. My second was caution. I moved in front of Ari and Miles, hand automatically reaching toward the toolbox in the corner, because that's what men like me are trained to do when something unexpected shows up. We don't run. We protect. Inside the house, I saw movement. Faces turned toward the window. Clarissa was standing near the fireplace now, wine glass frozen halfway to her mouth. Jenna leaned toward the glass like it was a screen showing a scene she didn't understand. No one inside came out. Not yet. The limo didn't stop at the front door. It passed it. Slow, deliberate, like it was searching. And then it turned toward the garage. My stomach tightened. The engine cut with a soft growl. No dramatic rev. Just a clean stop. Then, silence. A soft click broke the stillness as the back door of the limo opened. A man stepped out. Tall, sharp lines, clean-shaven, in a tailored gray coat that probably cost more than my truck. His shoes didn't belong on gravel, but he walked with purpose like he didn't care what they stepped in. He looked around briefly, then zeroed in on me. "Excuse me," he said, voice calm but cutting through the air like a razor. "I'm looking for the owner of this house." My first instinct was to point back at the mansion. "That'd be the Hartwells," I said, motioning toward the glowing windows. He tilted his head, then pulled out a folder. Thick. Legal. Official. No, I mean the legal owner. Raymond Knox. My name hit me like a punch I hadn't braced for. "I'm Raymond Knox," I said slowly, wiping my hands on a rag tucked into my back pocket. My kid stood behind me now, still, silent, trying to figure out if this was good or bad. He offered his hand. Firm grip. "Silas Byrne," he said. "Private acquisitions executive. I apologize for the unannounced visit, but it was important." Clarissa's family was fully pressed against the windows now. Faces like portraits, mouths slightly open, eyes narrowed. Jenna whispered something to her husband, who looked just as confused. Clarissa herself had taken a step back from the glass, arms crossed, trying to stay composed. "What's this about?" I asked, still unsure if this was real or some elaborate misunderstanding. Silas opened the folder. "Your patent filing," he said, flipping to a page with diagrams I'd drawn by hand months ago. "The Sustainable Combustion Retrofit Kit. We've been reviewing your proposal for the last 2 quarters. Quietly, as requested in your application." I blinked. "Wait, you actually read that?" He gave a small smile. "Not only did we read it, we tested it. The emissions reductions are staggering. It's potentially revolutionary, which is why we're ready to invest." I could feel the heat from the garage's overhead lights suddenly change. My heart was pounding. I looked at the folder, my name printed on the documents, the blueprints that I'd submitted under my own tiny LLC. I had done that at night, after work, when the shop was closed and the kids were asleep. I never told Clarissa. She never asked. It wasn't a secret, it was just mine. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice catching. "I thought you'd rejected it." I never heard back. "We were vetting it," he replied. "And vetting you. We believe your design could disrupt combustion engineering for retrofit industries. And frankly, we want to be on the front end of that disruption. My firm's ready to license your technology and offer you a seat on the innovation board." Ari gasped. Miles looked up at me like I had grown wings. From inside the house, I could see a flurry of movement now. Clarissa stepping away from the group. Her father's expression twisted into something unreadable. Jenna, mouth open, hand on her chest. None of them had any idea what was going on. And it was delicious. "You're sure you have the right Raymond Knox?" I asked with a smirk, part of me still stunned. "We're very sure," Silas said. "We've already arranged hotel accommodations downtown for tonight. We assumed you might prefer not to stay here once the news broke." I laughed. I couldn't help it. For the first time in hours, it wasn't forced. It came from a place deeper than humor. It came from relief. From validation. From a recognition I'd stopped expecting. Behind me, Miles whispered, "Dad, are you famous now?" I crouched beside him. "No, buddy." But someone finally realized I mattered. I stood and faced Silas again. "Let me grab our things." He nodded, already stepping aside to open the limo door. And as I turned toward the house, I met Clarissa's eyes through the window. Everything had just shifted, and she knew it. I had barely taken a step before Clarissa came storming out of the house, her heels clicking against the stone pathway like an alarm bell. She clutched her cardigan around herself like it was armor, face pale but trying hard to pull together something resembling control. Her eyes flicked from me to Silas, to the limousine, then back to me. "Ray," she said, her voice low and urgent. "What's going on?" I didn't answer right away. I turned to Ari and Miles, motioning for them to wait by the car while I gathered our stuff. They nodded, still wide-eyed but quiet. They didn't need to hear what I was about to say. Not all of it. Clarissa stepped in front of me again, forcing eye contact. "Seriously, what is this?" Silas answered for me. He stepped forward, his tone measured, professional, yet undeniably firm. "Mrs. Hartwell, Knox," he corrected, after glancing down at his folder. "I'm here on behalf of my firm to discuss a licensing deal with Mr. Knox. He's the inventor behind the retrofitted sustainable combustion kit your family's home is currently deeded under." She blinked. "I'm sorry, the what?" Silas held out the folder, flipping to a highlighted section. "The house. This property. Deeded under Raymond Knox's name. Purchased 6 years ago. Mortgage paid off 2 years ago. All taxes filed jointly, but primary ownership, as per registration, is in his name alone." Clarissa looked like she'd just swallowed a handful of thumbtacks. "What are you talking about?" she asked me, voice cracking a little. I tilted my head, studying her. "You never asked whose name the deed was in. You just assumed it was yours or your family's. When your parents offered to help with the down payment, I said no. Remember that? I paid for this house, Clarissa. Every square foot of it. With the money from the shop. But you never said." "Because you never cared to know," I said, my voice firmer now. "You were too busy trying to shrink me to fit into your world." Behind her, more of the family began to trickle outside. Jenna was first, arms crossed tightly, her husband trailing behind. Then came her parents, standing off to the side with expressions like they were watching a dog walk on 2 legs. Clarissa's father looked almost offended by Silas's presence, like a tailored coat couldn't possibly belong to someone dealing with me. "What's this about patents and licensing?" Clarissa asked, turning to Silas again. He opened another section of the folder. "Mr. Knox submitted a patented design through a private firm 3 years ago. We've been monitoring its development, performance testing the prototypes, and calculating its market potential. As of this month, we've decided to move forward with a full-scale investment and licensing partnership. We'll be acquiring the rights under a structured agreement, and Mr. Knox will also be joining our innovation board as an executive consultant." Jenna snorted. "Wait, him? Are you serious?" Silas didn't flinch. Dead serious. Her mother stepped closer. "But he's a mechanic." I turned to her, a wry smile tugging at my lips. "Yeah, one who builds things, not just fixes them." Clarissa's father finally spoke. "Why didn't you ever mention this?" I shrugged. "Because you never saw me pass the dirt on my hands. I stopped trying to explain myself years ago." Clarissa moved toward me, her voice softer now, a little too late. "Ray, I didn't know." "No, you didn't," I cut in. "Because it was easier to pretend I was just the help. The man you brought out for photos and tucked away when company came. You didn't want a partner. You wanted a placeholder." The silence between us stretched long and sharp. Silas cleared his throat. "Mr. Knox, we've made accommodations for your family at the Marlowe downtown. You'll find all details inside this envelope." He handed it to me, the weight of it both physical and symbolic. We assumed, correctly, it seems, that tonight's setting might not be ideal for next steps. I took the envelope, nodded, and turned to Ari and Miles. "All right, let's get out of here." "Wait," Clarissa said, reaching for my arm. "Ray, can we at least talk?" I looked down at her hand, then up at her face. The mascara was starting to run a little beneath her eyes. She was scared now, not of losing me, but of what this meant. What it revealed. The lie they'd all been comfortably living around. The man they'd underestimated had stopped waiting for their permission. I gently pulled my arm away. "We could have talked years ago. When I asked you to see me. You made your choice. This." I motioned around the driveway at her family, the tension in their glares, the pity in their silence. "This isn't new. It's just finally visible." Miles ran up, tugging my hand. Ari followed, head held high. I opened the limo door and helped them in, handing the pie over to the driver. "Don't let this go to waste," I said. "It's the only thing in that house made with love." As I got in beside my kids, I looked one last time at the house I had paid for but never felt at home in. And I saw it. The exact moment Clarissa realized the power had shifted. Not because I yelled, but because I didn't need her anymore. The limo pulled away from the mansion like a final sentence to a long, ugly chapter. Through the tinted windows, I watched the house grow smaller in the rearview mirror, that sterile monument to status and showmanship. Clarissa and her family stood on the porch, frozen. Jenna still had her arms crossed, her expression twisted somewhere between disbelief and indignation. Clarissa's parents looked like they were watching a scandal unfold on live TV. And Clarissa herself? She wasn't crying. She wasn't shouting. She was just standing there, finally, mercifully, speechless. I leaned back in the seat, the soft leather wrapping around my shoulders like something I didn't know I needed. Ari sat beside me, silent but alert. Her eyes darted across the car's interior, soaking in every detail. Miles had already kicked off his shoes and was fiddling with the touchscreen panel on the side door. "Dad," he whispered, "there's a button for snacks." I smiled. "You hungry?" "Always." I reached out and hit the panel. A hidden drawer slid open, revealing cold drinks and packaged treats, nothing fancy, but more thoughtful than the 3 paper plates we were handed earlier. Miles beamed. Ari gave a half smile, the kind she always reserved for rare, earned moments. And right then, watching my kids come back to life one snack at a time, I knew I had made the right call walking out. They'd only ever known one version of me, the man who came home with oil under his nails and stories about stubborn engines and cheap spark plugs. They'd seen the shop, ridden shotgun in the tow truck, watched me fall asleep on the couch with invoices in my lap. They never knew the other life I lived once they were in bed. The part one never shared because no one asked. Not even Clarissa. 3 years ago, I started staying up late. After work, after dinner, after homework checks and bedtime stories. I'd go back out to the garage with a mug of coffee and a sketch pad. That garage, where they tried to exile me today, that's where my invention was born. The retrofit kit wasn't just about cleaner emissions. It was about giving old engines new life. It was about taking something people discarded and proving it still had power. I started with old blueprints from a busted carburetor system. I built prototypes from scrap parts and a 3D printer I bought off a retired engineer down in Trenton. I ran simulations, recalibrated, failed, rebuilt. Again and again. I spent nights online in niche forums, asking questions, reading white papers, learning the science I didn't get in school. I wasn't trying to be a genius. I was just obsessed with solving a problem. One night, after my 15th rebuild, I took my own truck out for a test run. It ran quieter, smoother. The exhaust smelled cleaner, less acidic. I knew I had something. That's when I started the paperwork. Registered a business in my name, Knox Torque Innovations. Filed the patent under that same LLC. I didn't tell Clarissa. Not because I was hiding it, but because I knew what she'd say. "That's cute. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Why waste time on something that won't scale?" Her world didn't make space for dreams unless they came with LinkedIn endorsements and dinner parties. So I stopped asking her to make room. But Silas found me. Not through the garage or the shop or even Clarissa's last name. He found me through a niche patent forum I posted on 9 months ago, when I shared a single schematic and offered to license it to whoever could take it further. Turns out, the CEO of his firm stumbled across it during a deep dive on sustainable mechanics. They traced the filing, did the research, found me. And now I was here, in a limo with my kids, on the way to a hotel I didn't book, holding a folder that confirmed the world saw value in something I built with grease-stained hands and second-hand tools. Ari turned toward me suddenly. "Why didn't you tell us?" "About the invention?" She nodded. I exhaled slowly, because I didn't want to promise something I couldn't deliver. I wanted it to be real before I put it in your hands. She stared at me for a beat. "It is real, and it's kind of amazing." Miles grinned, his mouth full of peanut butter crackers. "You're like Iron Man, but with tools." I chuckled, the sound shaking something loose in my chest. "Let's maybe not get that far." "No," Ari said. "He's right. They tried to act like you were nothing, but you were building something they couldn't even imagine. And now they don't know what to do with it." That stayed with me. Because she was right. Clarissa's family spent years ignoring what they couldn't define. I wasn't Ivy League, didn't come from generational wealth, didn't care about the right wine or the right watch. But while they were polishing their crystal, I was rebuilding the future under a flickering garage light. The limo pulled into the city, the skyline glowing ahead like a promise. We passed street lights and storefronts, office towers, and old diners. And somewhere between the 6th red light and the 8th bite of Miles' crackers, I realized this wasn't just about a deal. This was about showing my kids that the world may ignore you, but that doesn't make you invisible. You can build your own place, even if it starts in a garage. The hotel lobby was hushed, warm, and smelling faintly of fresh lilies and polished marble. The Marlowe didn't scream wealth, it whispered it. The kind of place that didn't need to prove anything because its floors already gleamed with quiet confidence. Silas handed me a leather-bound folio at the front desk, our room keys tucked inside, an itinerary, and a personal note from the CEO, Marion Tan. My kids looked around like we'd stepped into a dream. And honestly, part of me felt like we had. "Mr. Knox," the concierge smiled, "your suite is ready. Welcome." We took the elevator to the 23rd floor. The suite was massive. 2 bedrooms, a living room with a view of the skyline, even a fireplace. Miles ran to test every light switch. Ari walked slowly, as if trying to memorize it all before it disappeared. I stood there for a long moment, keys in hand, trying to decide what to feel. I was still standing there when Clarissa called. The name on my screen didn't startle me, but the hesitation before answering did. I had spent years taking her calls immediately, no matter where I was or what I was doing. Today, I let it ring 4 times. Then I picked up. "Hello, Ray." Her voice was low, shaken, but still that practiced softness she used when she didn't want to appear rattled. "Can we talk?" "We're talking." A pause. "Not like this." "Why not?" I said, stepping into the suite's kitchen, closing the door behind me. "This is the most you've listened to me in years." "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know you were working on something so important. That people were actually interested. I didn't know you were successful." That word hit differently coming from her. It wasn't a compliment. It was a correction. "I wasn't hiding it, Clarissa," I said. "I was just tired of shouting into a room that kept lowering the volume." "You're my husband," she said, like that was supposed to mean something now. "We should have been building together." "Were we ever?" I asked. "Because as far as I remember, you were building a life and I was the part that didn't fit the aesthetic." Another pause. "I'm sorry." She said it like someone trying to figure out how deep the wound was so she could apply the right-sized bandage. But I'd already bled out in that garage, paper plate in hand, while her family laughed like my dignity was a party favor. "I'm not angry," I said finally. "I'm just done begging to be seen." "That garage you all stuck me in? That's where I built the thing your friends are probably gossiping about right now." "That's not fair." "Fair." I cut in. "You let them treat me like I was beneath them. You let your sister humiliate me in front of our kids. And you didn't even check on us." She didn't respond. Silence stretched across the call like a rope pulled tight. "Ray," she said finally, "I want to fix this." I looked out the window at the skyline. City lights blinking like a Morse code I couldn't translate. Some things aren't broken. They're just built wrong from the start. "But we're a family." "No, Clarissa," I said quietly. "We're a family because I showed up every day and held it together. And now I'm choosing to let go." She started to cry. Or maybe pretend to. I didn't wait to find out. "I need to go," I said. "The kids are hungry. And for the first time today, they feel wanted." I hung up. When I stepped back into the living room, Ari was curled on the couch, a hotel robe wrapped around her shoulders, watching the city. Miles was on the balcony with a cup of hot cocoa from the minibar. His small frame silhouetted against the glass made something swell in my chest. "You okay?" I asked, walking over. Ari nodded. "Did Mom say anything?" I paused. "She said sorry." Ari blinked. "Did you believe her?" I thought about that. About all the times I'd defended Clarissa to our kids, explained away her coldness, excused her absence in moments that mattered. I thought about how often I told them she loved us in her own way, just quieter. "No," I said. "I don't think she's sorry for what she did. I think she's sorry she didn't see it coming." Ari nodded slowly. "I think so too." Later that night, after room service delivered actual food, steak, garlic mashed potatoes, vegetables that didn't come from a can, Miles curled up on the bed beside me. The TV played quietly in the background, some superhero movie he loved. "Dad?" "Yeah, but I don't want to go back there. To that house." I looked down at him, at his honest little face, at the way he trusted me to fix the parts of his world that broke. And I knew I couldn't take him back. Not to the house. Not to the woman who didn't protect him. Not to the life where his father had to sit in a garage to be tolerated. "We won't," I said. "I promise." He smiled, then drifted off to sleep. And I sat there, fully awake, watching my children breathe peacefully in a space where no one sneered, no one mocked, no one handed them shame on a paper plate. Clarissa's silence had said everything, and my silence from now on would say more. The next morning, the limo was already waiting when we stepped out of the hotel. Same driver, same smooth ride, but everything felt different. I wasn't just leaving a suite, I was stepping into a new life. I helped Miles into the back seat, his small backpack slung over one shoulder. Ari climbed in beside him, earbuds already in, but her eyes flicked up to meet mine. She didn't smile, not quite, but there was peace in her expression, a quiet kind I hadn't seen in a while. The driver closed the door behind us, and we eased into city traffic. I didn't ask where we were going, because I already knew. Silas had arranged a private tour of the company's innovation center, just outside the city limits. It wasn't some glass tower downtown. It was a converted warehouse, restored brick by brick and humming with potential. My kind of place. We passed corner shops, intersections, and wide stretches of road flanked by warehouses and factories. As the buildings thinned out, the hum of the city faded behind us. That's when Ari leaned forward and asked, "Are we ever going back to that house?" I looked at her in the rearview mirror. "No, we're not." Miles perked up. "But our stuff is still there." "Some of it," I said. "But the things that matter most, our time, our peace, our dignity, those come with us." Ari crossed her arms, thoughtful. "Mom didn't even call last night." "She did," I said, "while you were watching that movie. She wants to talk." Ari raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "Damage control." I smirked. "You're your father's daughter." "She wanted this life," Ari continued. "The fancy name, the events, the money. But she never wanted you to have it. Not unless you had to beg for it." Her words landed hard, and they were true. Clarissa had always needed to be the one with the power, the leverage. If I got too confident, she'd remind me who wore the designer shoes in the family. If I earned more hours at the shop or landed a good deal on a client's fleet service, she'd mention how it would have gone faster if you had a real business plan. But I never fought her on it. I thought love meant letting some things slide. Not anymore. I turned back in my seat and faced them both. I spent too long thinking if I worked harder, they'd accept me. But the truth is, no matter how clean I got my hands, I was never going to be clean enough for them. "Because you work with cars?" Miles asked, frowning. "No," I said gently. "Because they needed to feel better than me, and being themselves wasn't enough." He nodded like he understood more than a 10-year-old should. I hated that this lesson had been handed to him so early, but maybe it was better now than when it could have cost him more later. We turned onto a long driveway lined with trees. At the end of it stood the Innovation Center, a wide, 2-story industrial building, with black-paneled windows and a simple steel sign, Burn Tech Labs. No gold letters. No fountains. Just purpose. As we pulled in, I saw Silas standing near the entrance, hands in his coat pockets. When we stepped out, he greeted us like we were old friends. "Welcome," he said with a nod. "The lab team's eager to meet you." Inside, we were guided through rows of workbenches and test bays. Engineers were clustered around engine blocks, diagnostic panels, 3D printers humming in the background. People looked up when we walked by, not with judgment or forced politeness, but curiosity, recognition. A woman in a blue work jacket approached. "Mr. Knox," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "I'm Vera, lead mechanical designer. We've been reviewing your prototype. It's elegant, clean, smart design." It was the kind of compliment that would have meant everything to me once. And it still did, but not for the reasons it used to. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. We spent the next hour walking the floor, looking at expansion plans, meeting with a legal rep about the licensing terms. I kept Ari and Miles close. They belonged in this part of the journey too, not as accessories, as witnesses. When we stepped outside, the sun was starting to lower in the sky. The driver opened the door again, but this time, I didn't get in right away. I stood there, looking down the long drive that led back to the city, and beyond that, to everything I thought I had to accept just to survive. That's when I saw them. Clarissa's parents' car, pulling up slowly at the curb. Her father stepped out first, followed by her mother. They didn't walk toward us, just stood there, unsure, watching. Clarissa wasn't with them. Ari saw them too. She slipped her hand into mine, squeezing gently. "Don't." "I'm not," I said. I already left. And I meant it. We got into the limo, doors shutting with that soft, final click. Miles looked up from the snack drawer again. "So, are we rich now?" I smiled. "Not yet. But we're free. And that's better." The limo pulled back onto the road. Through the window, the lab faded from view, but the feeling it left? That stayed. Because once people finally see you, really see you, there's no going back to being invisible. Not ever again. The next evening, Silas arranged dinner with Marion Tan, the CEO of the firm that had just flipped my world upside down. I'd seen her name at the bottom of the licensing agreement, her signature in bold ink, but I hadn't yet seen the woman behind the empire. According to Silas, she built her company from the ground up, starting with a single patent, a borrowed workspace, and a second-hand laptop in a Brooklyn walk-up. He said she was brilliant, unforgiving in negotiations, but deeply respectful of creators. She didn't buy ideas. She partnered with people. We arrived at the restaurant just after 7. It wasn't a flashy place, no white tablecloths or valet service. It was tucked on a quiet street corner downtown, all dark wood and soft jazz playing low through speakers embedded in the walls. I liked it immediately. Ari and Miles came with me. Marian had insisted. If your kids were there when no one saw you, she'd said through Silas, they should be there when the world finally does. The hostess led us to a private room near the back. A wide table sat under a soft pendant light. Marian was already there, seated, sipping something dark from a short glass. She stood as we entered. "Mr. Knox," she said with a firm, confident voice and an extended hand. "It's about time we met." I shook it. Her grip was strong. "Call me Ray," I replied. She turned to Ari and Miles. "And these are the real bosses, I take it." She turned to Ari and Miles. "And these are the real bosses, I take it." Ari gave a polite smile. Miles grinned wide. "This place smells expensive," he whispered. Marian laughed. "That's because it is. But tonight, it's yours." We sat. The waitress brought menus, though Marian waved hers off. "I've eaten here 100 times. I just tell them to surprise me." She folded her hands on the table and looked at me like she'd already read 100 pages of my story and was deciding whether to invest in the sequel. "Ray," she said, "I read your blueprint twice. And I have a lab full of very smart people who read it 5 more times each. They're impressed. But more than that, they're curious. How did you come up with this retrofit system on your own?" I sipped my water, buying a moment. "I work with engines all day. See what wears down, what fails, what lasts. After a while, you start thinking about how to do more with less. I wasn't trying to reinvent anything. I just wanted to make something better." She leaned forward. "That's where all the good stuff comes from. Necessity, frustration, and a little bit of obsession. I've got plenty of that," I said, and she smiled. We talked for the next hour about tech, about market disruption, about what I wanted to do with the licensing funds. I told her I didn't want a penthouse or a Ferrari. I wanted to expand my shop, hire apprentices, build a mentorship program for kids who liked machines but didn't see college in their future. She nodded along like she already knew. Maybe she did. Ari surprised me by joining the conversation. My dad built the first version of his kit in our garage. He had this huge whiteboard with formulas and parts numbers and coffee stains everywhere. It looked like chaos, but it wasn't. It was like a secret code only he could read. Marian turned to her. "Sounds like he had a good assistant." Ari smiled fully this time. He didn't need one. He just needed people to stop underestimating him. Marian raised her glass. "To people like your dad. Quiet builders. Loud results." We toasted with water and orange juice. Even Miles joined in, clinking his glass with exaggerated ceremony. When dinner came, it wasn't fancy, just damn good. Roast chicken, warm rolls, creamy polenta. Food that tasted like someone gave a damn while making it. Halfway through, Miles leaned over and whispered, "I don't want this to end." "It's not ending," I whispered back. "It's starting." After dessert, Marian leaned back in her chair, assessing me one more time. "We're putting your name on this, Ray. You're not just a file in a cabinet. You'll be part of the board, advising on design, giving feedback on prototypes, even sitting in on innovation panels. You built something smart. Let's help the world use it." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm in." She stood and offered her hand again. "Welcome to the table." This time, the shake felt different. This time, I wasn't the man they barely tolerated. I wasn't the mechanic in the garage. I was the man who built something they couldn't ignore. Back at the hotel, the kids fell asleep fast, bellies full, minds quiet. I stepped out onto the balcony, looking at the glow of the city. I thought about everything it took to get here. The nights I doubted myself. The mornings I almost didn't submit the patent. The Thanksgiving in the garage. And then I thought of Clarissa's silence. And how, in all the noise I'd lived through, that silence had finally set me free. Weeks passed like a string of clean shifts at the shop, steady, fulfilling, quiet in the best way. The first licensing payment came through 2 weeks after the interview dinner. I didn't celebrate with champagne or buy something flashy. I paid off every debt I owed. Leased a second space across town to expand the garage. Hired 3 young guys who reminded me of myself at 20, hungry, humble, unpolished. One of them, Damien, nearly cried when I handed him a company-branded set of tools on his first day. "This yours," I told him, "as long as you keep showing up with heart." He gripped those tools like they were gold bars. I upgraded the break room, stocked the fridge, got new tires for the tow truck, and replaced the squeaky office chair I'd been sitting on for a decade. Nothing extravagant, just better, stronger, more stable. And then I moved us. The apartment we found wasn't massive. It wasn't in some gated neighborhood or glass high-rise. It was a simple 3-bedroom in a good school district, with a small front porch and a yard Ari could use for her sketching and Miles could tear up with a soccer ball. It was the first time I picked a home that was just ours, not tied to another family's name. Not a performance space with curated furniture and silent expectations. Just wood, windows, and peace. We spent the first Saturday there unpacking boxes and ordering pizza. I let Miles pick the curtains, which he immediately regretted when he realized they were glow-in-the-dark race cars. Ari organized the kitchen with surgical precision, rolling her eyes every time Miles misplaced a spoon. By the end of the day, the living room was cluttered with boxes, and the couch still smelled like the plastic wrap it came in, but it was perfect. That night, after I put the kids to bed, I stepped into the bathroom and stared at the man in the mirror. Same hands, same face, same short-cropped hair. But something was different. I wasn't slouched. I wasn't apologizing. I wasn't trying to shrink myself to fit into someone else's life. I was standing there like a man who finally understood his own weight, his own worth. The bathroom light caught the edge of my jaw, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone. I'd spent so long living in reaction, reacting to being dismissed, to being talked down to being underestimated. Clarissa and her family had built an entire architecture of silence around me, and I'd let them. I made excuses for their condescension. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. I told myself love required patience, tolerance, humility. But love that asks you to shrink isn't love. It's control. Clarissa called a few times after the interview dinner. At first, I answered. I let her say the things she probably rehearsed in the mirror. I didn't know. I didn't mean to. I always believed in you. But I knew her voice too well. Knew the difference between regret and panic. And what I heard wasn't remorse, it was fear. Fear that I was becoming something she could no longer define. Fear that the man she'd managed and molded was suddenly outgrowing the cage. So I stopped answering. Then came the message, "Can we meet? Just to talk. No pressure." I agreed. We met at a diner halfway between my shop and the house she still lived in alone. She wore her softest blouse, the one I used to buy her roses to match. But her eyes were guarded. She sat like she was preparing for a deposition. She asked about the kids. I answered. She asked if I was happy. I nodded. And then she said it. Maybe we needed all this to see what we had. I stirred my coffee and looked her dead in the eye. You didn't have me, Clarissa. You had a version of me you felt superior to. And I accepted that for too long. Her throat tightened. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. You didn't make me. I chose to feel small to keep the peace. But that was my mistake. She reached across the table. I didn't take her hand. You're really done, she whispered. Yes. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't dramatic. It was just final. When I filed for divorce, I didn't hire the most aggressive attorney in town. I didn't demand spousal payback or make a show of wealth. I kept it clean. She kept the house. I kept the kids. Split holidays. No bitterness. No fireworks. Because I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in peace. In mornings that didn't start with criticism. In evenings that ended in laughter instead of silence. In a life that felt like mine. 1 week after the divorce was finalized, Ari helped me hang the last frame in our new living room, my shop's first dollar, pressed into a shadow box. Miles added a sticky note underneath, the hands that made it. I stared at it that night, fire crackling low in the background, my kids asleep down the hall, and thought about how far I'd come. The man in the mirror hadn't changed. He just finally saw himself clearly. And that made all the difference. 1 year later, I hosted Thanksgiving in my own home. Not Clarissa's family's mansion with the chandelier that cost more than my first car. Not the sterile dining room where I was handed a paper plate like a punishment. This was my space, modest, warm, loud in the best way. Real. Ari baked her first pumpkin bread from scratch, carefully following a recipe she'd printed out and decorated with doodles of turkeys and leaves. Miles set the table like it was a championship event. He even ironed the napkins, well, sort of. They were wrinkled at the corners, but perfectly folded, and that's what mattered. The table was wood, slightly scuffed, bought from a second-hand shop that didn't care about names, only if you could carry it out yourself. We had 8 guests, 2 of my new shop techs and their girlfriends, our neighbor Miss Carol, who brought sweet potato pie that nearly made me cry, and Damien's younger brother, who Ari had taken to like a sibling. There were no place cards, no designer cutlery, just laughter, the smell of roasted turkey, and the feeling that everyone sitting down was meant to be there. I watched the room from the kitchen as I stirred the gravy, real gravy, not something dumped from a canon to dry meat. The music was low, the lights soft, and for a moment, I let myself take it all in. Ari caught me staring. "You okay, Dad?" I nodded. "Better than okay." She smiled. "It's different, huh?" "Yeah," I said, "but the kind of different I wish I'd known earlier." She walked over and leaned against the counter beside me, arms crossed like Clarissa used to, except without the judgment. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The old house, I mean?" I paused. Thought about the marble floors, the cold wine glasses, the way I never quite felt allowed to exhale in those walls. "No," I said. "I think what I miss is the version of me that still believed I needed their approval." Ari didn't reply, but she didn't have to. She just nodded like she understood something bigger than most kids her age. Dinner was loud, messy, perfect. Miles spilled cranberry sauce on his shirt trying to show off his juggling skills with the bread rolls. Someone knocked over a glass. Miss Carol told a story that had the whole table cackling, and for once, I wasn't the man on the edge of the room, smiling tightly to keep from falling apart. I was at the center, because this time, I built the table myself. After everyone left and the dishes were stacked high, I stepped out to the porch, letting the night air wrap around me. The stars were faint, but I found a few. Enough. Ari came out and sat beside me, tucking her legs under herself. "Think Mom's doing Thanksgiving tonight?" she asked softly. "Probably." "Think they're still using paper plates in the garage?" I laughed, not bitterly, not cruelly. Just freely. "I hope not," I said. "But I also hope they learned something." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You did." "What's that?" "You didn't just leave their table. You made your own. And you let us sit at it." That hit me somewhere I didn't know I still carried hurt. I wrapped an arm around her shoulder. "I'll always make room for you." Silas called later that weekend to tell me that the media had picked up on the story. "Not because of the tech," he said. "Because of you. The mechanic who turned a garage into a think tank. They're calling it the Limo moment." I chuckled. "Sounds dramatic." "People like reminders," he said. "Reminders that success isn't always polished. That it doesn't wear a suit. That sometimes it wears coveralls and works after everyone else has gone to bed." I looked around the house then, our home. The soft hum of the fridge. The sound of Miles in the other room laughing at some cartoon. The smell of leftover turkey in the air. It didn't start with the limo, I told Silas. It started with the silence before it. He paused. "Say more." "That moment in the garage, before the headlights. When I sat there with my kids, humiliated, excluded, trying to pretend it was okay. That silence was louder than any applause I'll ever get. It told me who I was to them, and who I wasn't. And I decided I'd never feel that again." Silas was quiet for a beat. "You're not just building tech, Ray. You're building legacy." After we hung up, I stood at the window for a long time. Clarissa never tried to come back. Not really. A few emails here and there, asking if we could co-parent amicably and if we were settling in. I answered briefly, politely, but I didn't offer bridges. I didn't need to. Some people only see value in you when others do first. And some people only see you when it's already too late. The garage had once been a place of exile, then invention. Now, it was just a memory. The real story, the one that mattered, was this. I stopped waiting for a seat at their table. I built my own. And this time, everyone at it knew exactly who had carved the legs, laid the wood, and set each plate down with pride.